In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be discussing the loss against Juve in the Derby d'Italia. We'll be previewing the Europa League game against Getafe, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, on SempreInter.com.
Per De Vrij, c'è la torre per Messina, l'ha presa! L'ha ripresa Messina! L'ha ripresa Messina! Gol! E gol, e gol, e gol! E gol, e gol, e gol! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il tiro! Samir! Samir! Bogdanovic! La recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, e gol, e gol!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host, Nima Tavallaey, wishing you all back to a new episode after a rather disappointing weekend, although expected. But before we get to all of that, I'm going to introduce the panel. We have our good friend Carlo Garganese making his second appearance of the season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. Great to be back. Thanks for having me, Nima.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. And we also have a returning guest who used to be on the show quite a lot. Those of you who listen through the years will recognize him. He's a Canadian freelance sports writer. Right, you can read his stuff on Grace Note Live, where he writes mostly about American football, or American egg chasing, as I call it. Welcome back, Mr. Max DeLuca.
Nima, how are you? Great to be back.
It's good to have you, man.
Thank
Good
you.
to have you, man. And we're also joined by Mr. Positivity himself, although I think this week he will really struggle to be positive, all the way from Dubai, SempreInter's own preview writer, Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
Yeah. Hi. I'm happy to be here, but struggling to find the silver linings this week.
Well, you're gonna have to work for it because we need the silver lining. So let's get to it. I wanted to start with you, Max. You haven't been on the show for quite some time, so I wanted to ask you a little bit, just starting with yesterday's game. What your impressions were overall, but above all, also what your impressions have been of Inter under Conte. It started out really well, but it's kind of leveling out now. What do you think about all that?
Well, first thing I'll say is obviously the loss was disappointing, and I'll get into that in a moment here. But I think Interisti need a fresh dose of daily perspective here. I mean, let's go back a year from this date. We're almost 30 points behind Juventus. We're dead and buried. Like, it doesn't seem like there's been progress made under Conte. But I mean, if you asked Interisti before the season that they'd be in the thick of the title race in early March, we would have signed up for that in a heartbeat. But given that yesterday, I mean, they say that it's the hope that kills you. And I mean, Juve looked vulnerable. They lost 1-0 to Lyon. This is a weaker side than they fielded in 5 or 6 years. And you kind of felt, if you're an Inter fan, it's now or never. And just that second half, just for them to come out with no heart and no desire, couldn't set up any scoring chances. It was deflating. Like Mo said, I'm struggling to find the silver linings. I mean, I guess it feels like there's been progress under Conte, but that was a donk punch yesterday, and it's hard to get over it. It's hard to be in a festive mood for Inter's birthday today, put it that way.
For sure. There's no doubt about that. But for me, it was I was expecting this. I got to say, I was kind of expecting this because I've all throughout the season, Mo and myself, we've been saying that Inter are not. We won't even go near the Scudetto discussion until April. If Inter are thereabouts in April, then we can talk. Now Inter are definitely out of the Scudetto race, but I gotta say I'm not that bothered, to be honest, because for me this was a foundation year. Playing Conte's football, having him at all, just having Conte in the building. You have to adapt to him, and you have to, and it becomes like a year zero almost. And to me, Inter once again proved that they were not, that they lack the depth that Juve had. I know that Carlo doesn't agree with me, so I wanted to kind of get into this we're going to get into this a little bit as well. But for me, I thought that Juve were just better throughout the game from start to finish, and showed why they are a team that is one of the best in Europe, and Inter aren't. I think all of that was clear yesterday. Inter can't seem, they can't seem to make it count against the big teams, and they struggled with that consistently this season. When they played against Barcelona both times, when they played against Borussia Dortmund, when they, now the second time against Juve, those have been the best teams Inter have played, and Inter, they are still lacking. It's work in progress. So I can't be too disappointed. I honestly can't. Carlo, I want to hear your thoughts about the game.
So from Inter's perspective, I was very disappointed with the performance. I have to be honest. I think Del Piero said after the game that Conte wasn't brave enough, didn't take enough risks. And that's the impression that I got from the game, that I thought that Juventus tried to win the game, whereas Inter were mostly, apart from a little period in the first half, were mostly passive. They were very flat for most of the game, which is strange when you consider that they've had a long rest. Maybe it was too long a rest that they lost their rhythm through having such a long period. What was it? A week and a half without a game. And the game against Ludogorets, quite a lot of the reserves played in that game. So you could say it's almost been 2 weeks since Inter's first team played properly together. So maybe that actually worked against them in the end. But generally, I was very disappointed. I mean, Inter barely created a chance for the entire game, and there was just no threat going forward. Lukaku was very poor. I mean, he got taken off, which is almost unheard of. Lautaro Martinez, again, very disappointed. I've been disappointed with Lautaro since the reports about Barcelona's interest really started to build up in January. He's been very disappointed. I almost feel like has his head been turned. So yeah, very, very disappointing. And I mean, it was like Max said. I've felt all season that Juventus are there for the taking. So I would have just liked to see Inter go for it more. I would have liked to see them really have a go at Juventus. And I just felt like they never did. They just played too tactical, too passive.
But that's Conte, isn't it? I mean, that's what you get with Conte. I remember, was it with Chelsea when they were a goal down against Man City and he orders them back to stand in behind the ball? I mean, and they're a goal down and City looks so confused. I don't think I've ever seen footballers look so confused on a pitch. Kevin De Bruyne is looking at Pep going, what do we do now? They're guarding their 1-goal deficit. So I mean, this is what Conte does, and to me, I think it's kind of, I don't know. I think there's still a gap between Inter and the absolute top, which I think Juventus are there. Sure, they were there for the taking because Sarri plays a different kind of brand of football. He's an ideologue and not a pragmatic coach like Allegri was, and you can say that. But at the end of the day, I think the depth kind of took out its toll, and I think, I know that Khedira and Matuidi, people make fun of them, but 2 world champions, 2 players that have, at least Khedira, he's won the Champions League on several occasions. I mean, these are quality players who have the experience, who know how to play, who know how to play, and know have a width of knowledge in terms of carrying out diverse different roles in the midfield. And to me, I think that's what kind of put it over the edge. I mean, Dybala, when he came off the bench, he was the best player on the pitch, and that, I mean, not just for the goal he scores, but also because of his quality. I mean, he was absolutely fantastic. Mo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything everyone's kind of said, bits and pieces here and there. I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I have to agree with Max in the sense that, all things considered, it's been pretty good so far. But I also agree with Carlo in the sense that, you're left with a bit of a bitter taste after the match, thinking that more could have been done, and maybe had Conte risked more, the result would have been more in Juve's favor, possibly. But at least we would have liked to have seen some of that fight. And I've been talking this talk the last few weeks about maybe it's about energy management, etc. But all of that's thrown out the window now. It's clear that there is a physical problem in the team, and it's not about energy management. It's a problem, like you say, possibly in depth, possibly in motivation, whatever it is. But there is an issue. I'm not going to say a problem, but there is an issue with the way the team is performing vis-a-vis their physical output in the beginning of the season. But again, as Max said, I frame this in the general sense that I'm definitely not, upset. What I think when talking about silver linings, what I think this does is really highlight how winnable and how much Inter need to go for the Europa League, as opposed to any sort of chance. Even if, assuming that domestic competitions continue, even then, I don't think. I think Inter's best chance for silver this season is the Europa League, and Conte and Inter really should focus on that.
That's you got me on board on that whole Europa League train a couple of episodes back when you laid out the whole thought process behind that. You really got me pumped up on that. I was completely against it, and lovely, playing Bulgaria's 7th best team, like woo. But no, you really got me hyped up for that. But we'll see what happens there. But I mean, if we look at the game itself, I thought that where Juve won the game was the midfield. Bentancur was fantastic in that deep lying role, and the players he had, Ramsey's movement and mobility and dynamism was ripped Inter apart. Neither Barella or Vecino could keep up with that. Matuidi as well was phenomenal, and it allowed the amount of pitch those three covered between them, especially the latter two, allowed their wingbacks to completely push forward, almost like wingers, like they had 4 wingers, 2 on every side, and that really stretched Inter in 3-5-2, and I found that to be that was kind of where Conte lacked some sort of response. Previously in the season, he's been able to get the players to play to kind of counter that with his intensity. But when the signal that he sends to the team is that he wants to defend, then Inter are just there for the taking. And I think it's almost as if the game was lost before it started. I want to talk to you a little bit about this, Carlo, because you say that you think that there is not that much of a difference in terms of depth between Inter and Juve, and I'm kind of keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, two sides to this. First of all, speaking just purely from the Juventus side, I think that the idea that Juventus have this incredible depth in their squad is a bit of a myth, because if you break it down by each department, I mean, if you take the fullbacks for starters, both of Juventus's first choice right backs are not good enough. Danilo and De Sciglio, they're not good enough at the top level. So much so that Juan Cuadrado's been converted into a right back by Sarri, and in fact he was fantastic last night. Left back, Juventus only have one left back, Alexandro, who's basically played the entire season. If he gets injured, Juventus are in huge trouble. The only alternatives are basically right backs playing, in the wrong role, De Sciglio or Danilo again. Then if we jump over the midfield and go to the attack, Juventus have got 3 centre forwards playing for 2 positions. If we're talking about the 4-3-1-2 formation. That's Higuain, Dybala, and Ronaldo, which isn't a lot of forwards. And again, I think Juventus have been fortunate that none those 3 have basically stayed fit for basically the entire season. If one of them was to get an injury for a few months, again, Juventus would be in huge trouble. So really, you're left with the midfield where there is a lot of depth, but, and you may disagree with this, Nima, they're all pretty much of the same kind of quality. A lot has been said about Juventus' midfield not being strong enough, and I agree. I don't think it is strong enough. It's not an elite midfield. Certainly, if I compare it to Inter's midfield, if I had to pick 3 central midfielders, I would pick at least two Inter midfielders from that. So So that's the midfield. The only area of the pitch where I say yes, there is great depth in Juventus. I mean, fantastic depth is the centre back positions, because there's really 4 top centre backs. There's Bonucci, Chiellini, De Ligt, and Demiral, and then you even got Rugani as a 5th choice, which is not bad for a 5th choice. So there's absolutely fantastic depth at centre back. But I mean, if you're breaking down each department, I don't think there's that much depth, honestly, in terms of real elite depth. Not the way that everyone talks about it. And I think also, and this is very, very important, I think the squad wasn't built particularly well to a certain formation. I mean, you've got a lot of players that can only play in one system and others that can only play in another system. And the perfect example of that is Douglas Costa can only play in a 4-3-3, whereas Dybala can't really play in a 4-3-3. And when those two definitely can't really play together. And we saw yesterday that Dybala came on for Douglas Costa. Well, they weren't on the pitch at the same time. So yeah, I think the idea that Juventus have got this great depth is a little bit. It's not really true. I think Juventus have got quite a lopsided squad that's heavy in some areas, not very heavy in other areas. So yeah, I think that has been overplayed a bit, to be honest.
Interesting. Max, what do you think?
I just think Inter got beat by the better team. Sometimes you have to tip your cap to the opposition, and Juventus saved their best performance of the season for last night, and Inter had a dud. The wheels came off in the second half, and at the end of the day, that's the biggest difference. Depth matters, sure, but the 11 guys on the field, laid a dud in the second half. It's Groundhog Day for Inter. I mean, 1 win in the last 15 matches with Juventus. That's not a rivalry. It's one-sided. And take a wild guess who our only win in those 15 matches was with, who our manager was at the time.
Mourinho.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the manager of Inter when they last beat Juventus. Like, that's crazy. So it was par for the course, and like you said, I'm not sure. I wasn't too upset. I'm not sure if it was because of the atmosphere, which we should talk about at some point.
Yeah.
That was just, I mean,
it was weird.
Yeah,
it was weird.
Yeah, and it was funny because the players were helping each other up in the first half. Did you see that after tackles and stuff? It was great fun. What is going on here? This is the Derby d'Italia. But yeah, again, I only lost my cool at the end of the game when we, for some reason, tried to gift Ronaldo with 2 goals, right? And that's the only time where stuff went flying. I was resigned like you. I just accepted it, which is saying something.
Thing is, I mean, for me, if we look at that, I think that if Inter, after Juve lost to Lyon, if Inter played them when the game was supposed to be played, I think Inter had a bigger chance of winning, whether or not, even if it was played with spectators or not, because Juventus were shaken. But after a certain president got his way, they got 10 days to regroup. And Sarri made the most of that. And I think he kind of found back to when they were looking a month earlier or 2 months earlier, when they were kind of easily moving between the 4-3-3 and the 4-3-1-2. I think that, sure, I agree to your point, Carlo. I mean, about the depth in midfield being. I still think that if you look at, Barella, Sensi, Brozovic, that's a great midfield. Eriksen, it's clear that he can't play, or he's not ready today to play in Conte's in how Conte wants him to play. But if you were to compare, Vecino, Gagliardini, compare that with Matuidi, Pjanic, or Khedira even, or Bentancur, I'd go with all 4 if we're just talking quality. I'd go with those over Gagliardini and Vecino any day of the week. So for me, when I say depth, I mean the fact that, like you said, like you alluded to, that Juve can't have players that can only play in certain formations. I think that's a strength, because Juve can play 3-4 different formations in one game by making one substitution, and that that creates a lot of problems for an opponent, especially if that opponent is called Antonio Conte, who really doesn't seem to have like a backup plan, and is kind of, ever since January, his team is a little bit out of form. They've been struggling to win and get the results that seem to come naturally to them earlier in the season. So I think you're right. Yes, if you compare the midfield that they have with Bayern Munich or Barcelona or the top, then yeah, Juve maybe aren't the best, but they're not that far off. But I'm just comparing Inter with Juve, and I think that the quality there is a drop off in quality, and the fact that you can bring Dybala off the bench to me says really everything. Inter don't have a player of Dybala's quality on the bench. I mean, to be honest, I can't see who Inter have on the pitch starting who's as good as Dybala. To be honest, I honestly don't, and I think he showed that yesterday. I mean, that was magical. I mean, he got it like Max alluded to. I mean, that you got to give credit where credit is due. What Dybala did was simple. It was art. It was beautiful. There's no tip the hat. We lost to a better team. So I think that's what I mean when I say in terms of that's what I mean when I talk about the difference in depth. But I do think you're right. I think it has been exaggerated, and much too many Juve fans, much to their sadness, I don't consider Rugani a rather good central defender. I don't understand. I think he's a decent player, but the other four central defenders are fantastic, as you said. And now Chiellini's come back as well, and he's the captain. So who knows how far how good this could go for Juve. Mo, I mean, what do you see moving forward if we just ignore? If we just pretend, not pretend the coronavirus didn't happen, but if this season kind of continues at some point or in some form, the Scudetto's out. Do you think that Inter have a chance to, how realistic do you think it is to finish second, and does it matter even?
So to answer the second part of your question, I think it doesn't really matter whether we finish second or third. Either way, it's an improvement on the last couple of seasons, which have been a huge improvement to those preceding those anyway. So I think in all circumstances, this is going to be a positive year. Whether we finish second or not, I think ultimately depends on whether Lazio implode, as everyone kind of expects them to do, and bottle it as they have done in previous seasons. But again, it doesn't really matter. Now, where if everything does continue as originally forecast, with no suspensions, long-term suspensions to the league, and all games can be played before summer and with minimal impact to the Euro, etc. I think Inter are going to finish maybe 5-6 points off the pace, and it's just going to be great. I'm not too bothered. I've seen enough proper good stuff this season not to care too much. And like you said earlier, you and I, we haven't been on the Scudetto bandwagon at all. So the fact that we were part of it in the mix for a while is so great. The fact that there hasn't been a spring implosion, the Lazio and the Juve results notwithstanding, and of course they're all of this is being played in very strange circumstances. So I've seen enough great stuff this season to be able to, sit back and just enjoy the rest of the season as it plays out. What would really disappoint me is, and again, harping on the same point again, is if we don't take the European competition, the continental competition seriously. That would be a real disappointment. But anything else, even if we finish fourth, but comfortably fourth, it's a huge improvement on what we've done previously. The team is better structured. It's a stronger squad. It's a deeper squad. It's a squad that's in more harmony. There's a coach who, I love Spalletti, but a coach who's mentally stable, albeit with his own idiosyncrasies. But so I'm happy. I'm upset at the effort or the ostensible lack of effort in the match yesterday. But that's just a micro event. Overall, the macro feeling I get from the season is just one of great positivity. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Max, were you ever on the Scudetto bandwagon? Because we haven't been on so far this show, but were you ever on that Scudetto bandwagon?
Absolutely.
You and Carlo then, because Carlo kept telling me I was not. I was like I was not having it. I was definitely not having it. But when was it, like before the season started, or did you, or was it during the season? Like when did it start?
Um, I'm a Conte guy. I really like Conte. What he did in the Euro Championships, almost beat the defending champions Germany with Eder as our striker. I mean, if Buffon makes a penalty save, we beat Germany. So I'm on Team Conte all the way. I'm usually not gung ho about getting guys from Juventus managers or ex players or any of that stuff, but I think the way Conte left Juventus was a bit acrimonious, and I think he has a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. So I thought it was a perfect fit for Inter. And yeah, I would say about midway through the season, anytime you're on top of the table or in the first two spots, I mean, the Scudetto has to be realistic. I mean, I know you and Mo weren't on the bandwagon. For sensible reasons too, absolutely. But I mean, it was there for the taking this year, and I think the foundation is there. The future is bright. I agree with Mo on that, but I think we're gonna look back in a couple of years and say, "Oh man, what a missed opportunity."
Carlo, do you agree with that it's a missed opportunity? I mean, you kind of already said that you were you told me before the season that you thought Inter were going to win it. I kept saying no.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I necessarily said they're going to win it, but I definitely said that it's there for the taking, and I still believe that. I think that this isn't a great Juventus team at all. It's full of gaps, many of which I alluded to before, and really, the way Juventus have played, and I know this is kind of Juventus do this season after season, but Juventus, and they played well. Like they played very well yesterday against Inter, but that is an exception to the rule, which is Juventus have played badly all season. They've been bailed out basically by two players all season, Ronaldo and Dybala. If it wasn't for those two, Juventus would be way off the pace. And there's this really good algorithm which is called expected goals, expected assists, expected points, which Opta do. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it's really. I mean, I'm not a big guy for statistics, but it is the best way to judge how well a team or a player is performing, just disregarding the results. And Juventus's expected points for the season are 14 less than actually the number of points they've actually got. So that shows kind of how you can call it luck, or you can call it luck, or you can call it having two players like Ronaldo and Dybala who are just doing such incredible things that they're basically beating the machine. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So Juventus haven't played well at all. They're way down in terms of performances based on this model, which is very, very accurate. So yeah, I think it was there for the taking for Inter, and I still maintain now that player for player, Juventus and Inter are very, very similar. I think if you picked a starting 11 between Juventus and Inter, you'd have the same number of players. I'd probably pick more Inter players than Juventus players. Obviously, Inter don't have a Ronaldo or Dybala, and they are two absolutely world class players. In the probably the top 10 players in the world, and that, don't get me wrong, that makes a huge difference. That does. But I think that Inter shouldn't be too down on not winning the Scudetto this season, because I think that Inter are definitely on the way up, whereas Juventus are definitely on the way down. I mean, you look at the age of Juventus' squad. They're going to need to. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to that Juventus squad. I mean, apart from the centre back positions, which look really well stacked for a number of seasons now, there isn't really that much that Juventus can build around in that squad. Maybe Bentancur at centre midfield. Dybala is still young enough, but most of the team really, needs a lot of work doing. Whereas Inter, pretty much that whole squad can be together for the most of that first team can be together for the next 5 seasons, really, at their peak. apart from maybe Handanovic in goal, the rest of the team, and if you go through it, Skriniar, De Vrij, Bastoni, the midfielders, Lukaku's 26, Lautaro, if he stays, is 22. I mean, these players can be around for a long time. So it is a bit of a missed opportunity, but I'm sure that they'll be there again next season, and they'll be stronger next season for sure.
Agree with that. Right. As this is a Monday, the 9th of March, when we're recording this, and as of now, Inter are the game against Inter is hosting Getafe and behind closed doors at the San Siro on Thursday. But that could obviously change given the developments of the coronavirus. We'll have to wait and see. But if that game were to take place, Getafe are really working wonders in the La Liga and also in the Europa League, and they have, from what I've seen, the little I've seen, they really remind me a lot of Atletico Madrid and what Diego Simeone has done there with their coach Jose Bordalas. And I thought, Carlo, you've spoken quite a bit about them on Twitter, and I think I've read something of yours about them as well. I thought you might give us a little introduction into them, into Jose Bordalas and what he's done at Getafe.
Okay, well, I'm not too familiar from them, not firsthand. I haven't watched too much of them, but speaking to people, they are renowned for being a very Diego Simeone-like team. They're really tough. They play, you can call it anti-football, I guess, but they you really know they put you through a war when you play against them. They kick lumps out of you. I read one statistic that apparently, like, there's no team in Europe in which the ball is in play for less minutes than an Getafe game. So basically, they just try and disrupt the game, break up the play, give away free kicks, just make the game as messy as possible, play off set pieces. They're just a really horrible team to play against. These is what all the descriptions are of Getafe, and they're very, very tough teams. So if Inter are going to go through this, they're going to have to fight. They're going to have to show the real classic, Antonio Conte fighting spirit, and certainly a lot more fighting spirit than they showed against Juventus. So yeah, probably not the team you want to play when players are looking tired and flat, and you're complaining about squad depth. So yeah, it should be an interesting game from that perspective for sure.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly. It's a nightmare opponent for Inter. I mean, in this place Inter are in mentally, as they haven't been impressive since January, playing a team that plays like Simeone against you, which is very similar to Conte himself in the sense that you get into this kind of battle mode. That's really not what you want to do. So I'm really nervous about this game. Max, what are your thoughts? Do you think Inter will go through?
No. Inter struggled with Spanish teams. Well, I'm being honest. Inter struggled with Spanish teams in Europe over the years, and yeah, I read a couple articles on Getafe. I think there was one on Paul McDonald's site, Football Critic, about Getafe. It was a couple of weeks ago. It was an excellent article. But there's some similarities with the manager. I think is it Bordalas and Conte. Like he's a real hardo. He runs his players through the ground. Carlo said, this is going to be a battle. It's not going to be a walk in the park by any means. And you have to wonder about our mentality right now. It's a little fragile. The classic Inter psyche. You don't know if this is right. You don't know. We've seen it in past years. A loss like this, and suddenly the season snowballs out of control. It wouldn't be the first time it happened, but yeah, it's hard. It's difficult right now with the coronavirus. You just don't know if the game's going to be played. It's like when you play in your Sunday pub league, and there's a team that usually fields 6 players and the game gets canceled. So, I mean, there's a game scheduled, but you have to expect it not to play. And it's just a really difficult situation right now to get prepped. And if it does go through, we're in some trouble. It's going to be difficult to get through.
Mo, you've been advocating about the Europa League, and you've got me going on that. So now thanks to you, I'm going to be disappointed. So when we get knocked out. So much for being Mr. Positivity. No, but seriously, like, I mean, I don't know how much Getafe you watch, but based on what you heard, I mean, isn't this really like a nightmare draw for Inter?
Well, look, I mean, they are, again, like, had we drawn Getafe in the Champions League second round, you know, had this been the Champions League, we would have been smiling and cheering that it's not Real Madrid and it's not Barca, and Inter were playing in the Champions League. So all things considered about Getafe, Inter are a Champions League level side, and they are not. So, you know, I understand that they're a tough team. I understand that they are the worst of what what a Maran Chievo side can be in the worst days. But also, I believe that, you know, if Inter have the self-belief and the desire to go through, they should have the quality to be able to make it happen. You know, I think that it's a good thing. It's a good thing to face a genuine contender this early on, because it just gives you belief. Then we're just left with possibly only Manchester United amongst the real remaining contenders in the competition if we take Getafe out. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm saying that if we do in fact come out of the tie, you know, get into the quarterfinals, then it's an amazing omen. It bodes very well for Inter's chances in the competition. Let's put it that way.
That's for sure. Right, let's just quickly try to predict the first, or let's predict the first leg, how we think it'll end. I think it'll end in a 1-1 draw. Max?
Yeah, I mean, took the words from my mouth. 1-1 for sure.
Carlo?
I'm going to bring some positivity here. I'm going to go 1-0 Inter.
Well, what about you, Mo? You're Mr. Positivity, so you got to outdo Carlo now.
No, I can't outdo that. I'll say 1-0 Inter. Clean sheet is, again, paramount importance. So yeah, 1-0.
And Handanovic is back. He was good yesterday against Juve.
Yeah, that he was.
So good to have him back in. Padelli, who actually got sent off from the bench.
Ridiculously. Just to make sure that he doesn't play again.
He's so tired of the crap he's been getting recently. He just wanted to make sure that, you know, guys, someone else do it. Bernie, Stankovic, it's on you guys now. Right, let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football, starting with the negativity. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Carlo Garganese.
This week's Moggi of the Week is Juventus's president, Andrea Agnelli, after his quite shocking comments about Atalanta not really deserving to be in the Champions League this season. And I know a lot has been said about this, but it's just kind of smacks of the whole elitism that you kind of associate with Andrea Agnelli. I mean, for a number of years now, he's been pushing more than anyone for basically a closed European Super League. I mean, that is, let's not pretend anything else. That is what Agnelli wants. He wants a Super League just for the super clubs, the richest clubs in the world, and he wants it to be like a franchise, like it is in the the NBA. He wants no teams to be able to be promoted or relegated, and that is just going to be the final nail in the coffin of the beautiful game that we love, that is football. We've seen so many things go wrong in the game, in the last years, corruption, these kind of owners from various places in the world that don't really have football's best interests at heart. This will be the end of football, and we have to stop him. He's done a fantastic job at Juventus as a president. Don't get me wrong, as a president of Juve, he's done incredible to resurrect Juve after the shambles they'd become at the end of the last decade. but a decade before that is. But what he's trying to do now with this Super League is it has to be stopped. We all have to stop him.
I just have to. A lot of stupid nonsense have been said about this, because especially on social media, and people have been talking about lost in translation into English, etc. I mean, by people who claim to be journalists, and I wonder if they really are, because last time I checked, being able to Google properly isn't really something you have to pick up in journalism school. This is because this entire interview was available on Google if you Googled it. And you could actually click on it, and pay €19.99 to watch the whole event in London, because it was a videotaped event, and it was in English. And Andrea Agnelli's English is really, really good. It's impeccable. He speaks really good English. And I took the liberty to transcribe this particular part of what he said. And he says, and I quote, "You can retain your position at international level, provided that at least domestic level, you would have at least reached the minimum, place in the table. There are a variety of ways of doing this. It is debatable that simply because you sit in a big country, you have direct access to competitions. I have very high regards of what Atalanta has done, but without a European history, with a great performance last year, they had immediate access to international competition. Is that fair or not fair? Is that right or not right? If you miss, then I think of Italy and Roma, who has contributed a lot in the last couple of years in maintaining the Italian ranking. They had a bad season, out, which means financial liabilities. So it is also protecting the investments, the costs. So we should never forget that we invest, and we have the long-term consequences of our investments." The guy moderating then asks, "Andrea, just to be clear, you foresee a future when Atalanta is less likely to play at the top of the pyramid of the Champions League level because of just domestic performance more than..." I just want to be clear with what you meant. "I don't know. But the point is that," he replies, "I don't know. But the point is, the beauty of this is when we talk about an open and transparent process, I haven't got an answer. So I appreciate the introduction about me, but that doesn't mean I have the answer to all questions. It is about understanding what is the right balance. So we have an Ajax. You have a team that went to the semifinals of the Champions League, won the domestic league, won the domestic cup, and they went through qualification rounds just because of their club, or just because of their country, rather. So the point is how you balance this. What is the contribution you bring to European football, and what is the performance of 1 year? But I haven't got the answer, the precise answer on this. What needs to be understood is how you actually ensure that the virtuous clubs and the ones that are limited by the size of their market can actually thrive and not just be relegated to be player developers for the big teams." I mean, it's clear what he's talking about, and whoever else tries to tell you something else is just lying, or at best, at worst, lying, or at best, distorting the truth.
Well, the thing is, Nima, I always look at the bigger picture. So, regardless of the context or whatever, the bigger picture is that, I've been following Andrea Agnelli's plans for years.
Exactly.
And as I'm sure everyone has here. So it's no secret. Everybody knows what he wants. That he wants a European Super League. He wants a closed European Super League. It's no secret. So even if he was sticking up for us, even if what he said wasn't as bad as it did originally sound, the point is we know what he wants. So yeah, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear to me.
He literally says. He literally says he holds what Atalanta has done in high regards, but without a European history, with a great performance last year, they had immediate access to internal competition, to international competition. Is that fair or not fair? Is that right or not right? Well, it can't get clearer than that, and it's not a fair question. By doing that, you're questioning the very basis of sporting meritocracy, which he then goes on to claim that he's defending. It's so dishonest that I don't even know where to begin with.
And he also says that, about protecting investments. So, but basically, all he's saying is that only the clubs that have got the money to be able to invest, should be protected. Whereas if you haven't got the money to invest, well, it's all right. You haven't spent any money, so you're not worth anything. It's the classic. Elitism there. Isn't it?
It literally is.
I mean, I joked on Twitter the other day when because some of the results in the English Premier League this season. I mean, there's a real chance in the Premier League that we could have, because Manchester City might be banned next season. There's actually a real chance right now that Leicester, Wolves, and Sheffield United could all qualify for the Champions League next season. I mean, can you imagine Agnelli's face? So I put out a tweet joking. I said, like, if that actually happens, like, you could actually see Agnelli basically doing what Daenerys did in the final episodes of Game of Thrones, and just like flying the dragon over every poor person in the world, and just like just turning them to ash, basically.
But I think you're being unfair, Carlo. I think the dragon's fire was taken out of context. No, it's ridiculous. It's so blatant what he's doing. It's so blatant and what he wants, and he's been quite brazen about it. And I think anyone who tries to put some sugarcoat is basically putting some perfume on a turd and calling it I don't know what. It's quite evidence what this guy's doing. So no doubt. Right, let's move on to something much more positive. This week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Yeah, so from one president to another, this week's Moratti, again, in a week of the second consecutive week of very slim pickings, our very own Steven Zhang. First of all, his rant against Dalpino, which I believe we spoke about last week on Instagram, where he called him a clown for trying to put Dalpino, the head of the Serie A, for ostensibly compromising public safety and health to favor certain clubs in scheduling the matches when the Derby d'Italia was proposed to be played in front of fans on the Monday instead of the Sunday. So after that epic rant, the man goes on an interview and is asked whether, of course, a lot of chair shuffling in one's chairs in Italy, like these words were taken quite, caused quite a stir. And then he was asked if he maybe was a bit too harsh in a chance, to roll it back and appease the masses. To which Steven Zhang replied, "No, I don't think I was harsh enough. I think safety is always our number one concern," and referring back to how his native China has been suffering tremendously because of the outbreak, and making sure that this is framed in the context of real, genuine suffering. And so I just thought, like Marotta last week, I think Zhang this week did Inter good by sticking to their values and agree or disagree with what with the manner. I think that the message is itself very important, and it's important not to be bullied into backing down from saying something that you truly believe in and means very much to you. So yeah, he's my Moratti of the week.
Nice one, good one. No, I agree with that. I think sure, he maybe the number of emojis in that message were a little bit too many for my taste, but they felt. I mean, it was a bit childish in the, like you said, the form in which he said it, but the message is crystal clear. I mean, when you have to remember he's from China, this really hits close to home for him, and the disrespectful manner in which the Serie A president Dalpino has handled this, and the disrespectful way and kind of blasé way that they have handled this, blatantly putting profits and interests before public health and the health of the players, who actually at the end of the day are the ones doing the job, is quite disgusting. So I think he did the right thing there. I think the sentiment was great, and I'm really glad that he doubled down on it. He said he's when he says that when he goes, my words weren't hard enough. I like that. It just shows that he knows what he's doing. It wasn't just a heat of the moment kind of thing. There's actual thought behind this.
Exactly.
Right. Let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. Max De Luca.
È clamoroso, autogol di Ranocchia.
Well, the obvious frog of the week was Ronaldinho trying to sneak into Paraguay with a fake passport. That was much too obvious. So.
Man, I forgot how good Max's frogs are. Like
Frogmeister.
You've been missed. And it's not just the topic selection; it's the delivery as well. Amazing.
It's brilliant.
Did you see his mugshot today from Paraguay? Oh my God, Dio mio!
The best part of it, I think, is the fact that the prison ward where he's going to stay at, their league is going to start. Their football league is starting next week, just in time for him to like join into whatever.
That's classic.
Wasn't the policeman that arrested him taking like selfie with him or something?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. More than one. There's been numerous. But today his actual mugshot came out and he's just smiling his smile like he's on the field, on the pitch for Barcelona, scoring against Chelsea. Like, unbelievable.
My favorite part of all this is that Brazilian citizens don't even need passports to enter Paraguay. Like, that's the most brilliant part of this, is that there was no need for it.
I just hope he doesn't go down the road of Adriano. That's my only fear, because he's such a joyful player, Ronaldinho. Always a smile on his face when he had the ball. He was just, I just hope he doesn't go down that road. That's my only fear.
Yeah, I agree. Nice.
All right, let's get to the actual frog of the week, though. All right.
Yeah, go.
Okay. So the actual frog of the week goes to Rangers supporters out in Scotland who decided to show solidarity to their manager, Steven Gerrard, by giving him a standing ovation in the 8th minute of last Wednesday's match. And they did it in the 8th minute to match his jersey number from his playing days. So was there somebody ill? Maybe his wife or his father or his mother, or is there a big event in his life? No. The reason why they stopped the match in the 8th minute to give him the standing ovation, because poor Stevie was going through a tough time as the manager of Rangers because their title chances just went up in flames. That's not cringeworthy enough. Let's fast forward 82 minutes later when he's roundly booed off the pitch and jeered after they lose 1-0 to Hamilton Academical. So that goodwill lasted 82 minutes. So well done, Rangers fans. Way to show the world how to stand by your man.
Jesus Christ. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. You always pick the best ones. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I missed that. Oh, God. Right. Thanks, Max. I'd like to thank you for coming on. Don't be a stranger. You got to come on more often.
Anytime. Always a pleasure, guys.
And also, Carlo, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. It's great to be with you guys, and it's great to hear from Max again, because me and Max go back a long way. And
we do, Carlo, and I can't believe you're pushing sabermetrics. You're the last guy I thought that would jump onto that bandwagon. The apocalypse is truly upon us.
Oh dear. And as always, Mr. Mo Nassar, Mr. Positivity. I hope that we have some positivity soon to announce. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
And as always, I'm your host, Nima and Mohamed, wishing you all good health, a first leg win in the Europa League, and sempre e solo forza.
Passa Inter a balla,